Hey, Marta. Really excited to have this conversation with you and hear more about what you've been up to. I know there's a ton of exciting stuff to talk about, what you've been working on, like more recently, but just in general, I've seen really cool headlines in the past, I don't know, year or so of you tackling some pretty cool climate, sustainability problems with robotics. I'd love to maybe rewind the clock and go to sort of like day zero. Maybe dive into like sort of your origin story and what got you interested in all this. What do you think it was that got you started on the path that you're on today?
Yeah, totally. First of all, thank you for having me, and I want to congratulate you on like the work you do at Merch Club. It's really awesome. I love the content. That's kind of a tricky question because I think my perspective into my career has actually um, got pretty much alive as I grow up and expanded with that. But I know I started with robotics when I was really young. My father is a car mechanic, so he builds and restores cars. And because I'm like from the countryside, there isn't like a lot of stuff to do here. And I used to help him on my free time, and so I started to learn about all these things, mechanics, electronics, and I wanted to like build my own projects in that free time. So I started building like my own electronic toys, and pretty soon I started to actually turn into automation. So then just from instead of electronic toys, it would become like actual robots. um, and I would say the first robot I built, I was, I think, 9 years old. And it kind of started a little bit from that, but as I got older and I got access to the internet, I started to learn about other things, so programming, about operating systems. Later came AI, so a little bit of everything, because obviously like robotics is a really broad technological field. It always lacked a little bit of a purpose of doing this, so I didn't really know why I was just building robots randomly. And something I noticed as I was growing up was also that the community around me was changing a lot. So the forest was just like being torn down. The beach was getting full of tourists, full of pollution, and so I found it really joyful and fulfilling to switch my skill set to actually trying to solve those problems. And so I started to lean more towards climate robotics and trying to build robots that actually could protect ecosystems and restore something that was really dear to me in my community. And I would say that that's the little story. It's a little bit broad, and yeah, I
Mhm.
would say it was like that.
Gotcha. Man, I mean, I guess like, I'm sure some people who grow up with car mechanics in the family end up, having this fascination with robotics and all this kind of stuff. But I imagine the majority might not. Do you feel like you were starting out with like, were you very curious? Do you feel like your father was trying to get you into these kinds of things? Was there a natural inclination? I feel like, if I'm remembering back when I was 9 years old, I could have been surrounded with all of the tools necessary to do something like this, and I'm not sure. I might have wondered about it, but I don't know if I would have actually gone and done it. I'm really curious to hear, like, was it him that was really pushing for this?
I don't think I know. I would have to ask him. But there's one thing I suspect. So I have an older sister, and I think my parents are kind of like waiting to have like a boy instead of like a couple, and not like another girl. And at the time, um, well, I came to this world, and so I I basically was the handyman, and helping my father with that. But I also know that me and my sister were never like really afraid of getting dirty, but for some reason I was way more curious about this topic than her, and so she was playing with other stuff, and I was really focused on helping him and being in the workshop and trying out different power tools and just experimenting. And I loved problem solving, so really trying to solve problems here at home. Some were really silly ones, others not so much, but I think it really got towards this realm of problem solving and wanting to experiment with new things. And I would say that's perhaps more personality than just context. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know you mentioned, obviously growing up with the internet that opens up a ton of doors and potential pathways and rabbit holes to dive into. Um, as you were maybe moving from creating things that solved little problems at home or building these cool contraptions or toys or whatever, what was sort of like, I imagine there was an in between doing that and like doing what you are today, which is essentially like trying to solve like just these massive problems that people are facing around the world. How much of a role did the internet play in that? And was that mostly like YouTube? Was that online community? What was it about like the internet that was prompting you to like explore new things in robotics?
I think it was a little bit of my journey um, at school, actually. I know I was a very frustrated kid because I didn't enjoy school at all. I didn't want to learn anything there. Like, I enjoy a lot learning, but not the way we do at school. So I was super frustrated, and I knew I loved robotics so much. And my school had no robotics club. There was no such thing in like a, I don't know, like 2 hour radius from where I live. So I was really like encapsulated to the normal school system, and that was bringing me a lot of frustration. And I know that I would say like around seventh grade, I was literally failing math and Portuguese, which is what you guys have, or English or French. Um, and I felt like a failure. I remember feeling so much like a failure, and like my life was not prone to be successful in any way. And so what I would do was scoping on YouTube and other like, honestly, I think it was only YouTube at the time. But I didn't just enjoy regular YouTubers. I loved DIYs, and I loved specific YouTubers that build with electronics. Obviously, that was like sparking new inventions in my head. And that's sort of when I entered the world of the internet and understanding that there's even more people doing things that I can have quick access to and quickly try to do myself. And slowly, basically, advancing my projects into more complex things and trying to challenge myself to build other stuff. So I would say it was really because of I didn't want to do anything else, or like being in the real world was not super fun. And so I really focused on something that could just basically escape me from reality, which is learning something I was really passionate about. And that's where it started, really.
Interesting. I mean, I feel like there's probably something kind of special about, self-taught skills and having just the freedom and like time to go down those rabbit holes, alone and with, some sort of YouTube video or something like that. Do you feel like if there was a robotics club at school that things would have ended up differently, for the better or maybe even the worse compared to the path that you ended up taking, which was something that you decided to do on your own with your own sort of initiative?
Yes, and I can speak from experience because in like eighth grade or something like around that time, luckily my mother found a robotics club that was like 2 hours and a half away. So it was like a huge long bus ride. I don't remember how long, but something like this. And so I would take the bus every week and I would go there. And I quickly became an advanced student. So instead of being in the first grade of robotics, let's say, I was actually working with people who were my age. So that was really great because I already knew a few concepts, but at the same time, because I was really prone to just do something that was extremely challenging, even though I didn't know anything. And at the time, I know that the biggest skill or the biggest hard skill that was um, sparking a lot of capacity in this world of robotics was learning about algorithms. So we competed in a few competitions, like soccer robotics, and a few other ones, like alpine robot. That's how we call it. So basically, it's a robot that can climb walls. And we had to learn a bunch of mathematics that we were not learning at school, and it was really crazy because for the first time I actually wanted to learn them. And so I know that the fact that I had this community, to explain this safe place to basically explore my curiosity. And I remember my teacher was always challenging me, and he loved how curious we were and how naive in the sense of just not minding like trying new things. And that made a total difference to me because I felt super powerful in a way because I knew I was capable of doing so much more. I just needed the resources and a community that was, going all the way with me. So that was really really important in my journey.
Interesting. So the community ended up playing a big role in that, it seems, and in the end, it was actually it's kind of interesting because you didn't have that club sort of just by default in the school that you were in. So you decided to go out on your own and figure it out, and then you ended up finding sort of it sounds like the perfect thing that you were looking for the whole time, and that ended up being great. That's super cool. And so, I mean, I think a lot of times, even on the podcast when we're speaking with people, oftentimes these people are like very technical, like yourself. There's this feeling of totally being interested in learning topics as long as there's like a purpose in it, and it sounds like that's something that you can relate to with like the mathematics, for example. It was something that just like wasn't really interesting until it was applied to something that made total sense to you. So I mean, was that something that, like, going forward you were going to regularly? And I know that you ended up going to TKS and having that whole sort of community experience. Was that something that was pre that?
Yes, I think that's actually what got me into TKS. I was really looking towards making impact. And I remember it was like the day before my national exams, and I just saw an Instagram ad about um, TKS, which said, learn about emerging technology to impact billions and change the world. And that for me was like, this is my life sentence. And this is literally what I've been waiting for. And TKS really played a role in that because from all the experience I've had from the past years, I know that you can be like really passionate about a specific topic, whether it is mathematics, arts, doesn't matter. But if you don't have a purpose, you won't have discipline. You won't have something to wake up to in the morning. And especially, for example, if you're launching a startup, what is going to make you awake through the night and work through late hours if you don't have an ultimate goal with what you're doing? And so, for example, for the startup I know that every single effort that I make and every single extra mile that I have to learn to run will have an ultimate impact in my community. And for me, that's not an effort or time that I have to give up just to give in and give back to the community. And just gives me so much energy to do everything that I have left. So having a purpose, I would say, it's the most important thing one can have in their life. And otherwise, you just won't work for anything that actually makes you want to be alive. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I feel like the time that people find like a purpose or something that is really just it motivates them. It's just innately something that they're like extremely passionate about. Sometimes it comes before I feel like the person finds the way that they can sort of apply their skills to that. Like in your case, it's robotics, and you were lucky in a way to discover that like way before you even found the purpose. It sounds like, at least to me. I imagine a lot of people going through TKS maybe aren't at that point. I know, at least like personally, when I was applying, I could have very well have ended up going through the program and leaving, getting into robotics. I could have gone into biotech. Who knows? But it's interesting to hear from you that you already had the robotics. You were sort of looking for the purpose. How did the experience in TKS help shape that? What was it? A very straight line? Do you feel like all the way through you were tied to robotics and you were just straight from the get go even more and more interested in sustainability and climate tech?
Definitely yes. I was really focused, and I knew I wanted to do robotics as my focus at TKS. But honestly, finding my impact, or the impact that I wanted to have, was not super straightforward. I think sometimes we think a lot, like really, really broadly. We want to change the world. That's literally one of TKS's slogans. But I think that that needs to be a journey. Um, in my case, I think it is really easy, or it was really easy to find my purpose because I'm from the countryside, so a lot of my childhood is just tied up to nature. And when you see that being destroyed, something that you really, really tied up to, it's almost impossible not to care about it. And a lot of your purpose just comes from empathy. And that's definitely the route that got me to working towards climate and actually wanting to impact my community and the people around me. I would say that, for example, in the experience that I've had from launching Troubadour, um, I was always going through that mindset of impact, or impact in the startup world is measured by X amount of revenue, being a unicorn, being able to scale, especially when you're working with hardware, which is extremely hard. Um, that's the impact mindset I had. But fortunately, I had the chance to attend the Explorers Fest from National Geographic last year, and that totally changed my mindset because I met a lot of National Geographic explorers, and their impact was so specific but so intense, and it was measured in other things. It was measured in people's smiles. It was literally measured in kilograms of plastic taken from the ocean, or number of corals replaced in reefs. Um, and so that really recentered me to what do I actually want to do. So when we think about our life purpose, I don't think we just grow up with it, and or actually I don't think we just find it one day. We have to grow up our perspective to what we want to do, and sometimes we're gonna deviate from what we actually believe in. But all the experiences actually end up to compound in something that you really care for, and something that you can literally put in a statement. This is what I'm going to do. This is what I live for. Um, and in TKS, I think you have the opportunity to have so many experiences and work in so many projects that it really helps. And for me, it did to basically know it, at least what you don't like and what you don't want to work for. Um, so it definitely helped, but I think it's all part of a journey that you need to go by yourself, and learn from others at the same time.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I imagine going through, all of the emerging technologies that are spoken about at TKS, hearing about some that, obviously you're probably not the biggest fan of, or at least you're like, okay, that's good for some people, maybe not for me. But I imagine there were also some that were appealing, or maybe even applicable directly to robotics. I feel like the timing might be like super perfect for the things that you're working on. um Obviously software is like developing at such a rapid pace compared to robotics, but pairing them, I mean, you're speaking about learning like algorithms and stuff like that before, unlocks just a whole other set of possibilities and scalability with robotics. Do you feel like you had any realizations during TKS about how you could maybe like add things on top of the knowledge you already had with hardware and robotics? uh, do you feel like those are things that are affecting like how you even came up with Troubadour in the first place, or not? Was it sort of a straight ahead line and pretty simple?
I think TKS actually helped a lot to learn how to learn. um, they don't actually teach you like emerging technology, rather they teach you how to learn, and that was really really great for me. At the time, or when I was younger, I used to follow tutorials and sometimes just like literally do full courses on this specific microcontroller, and just being coach with my directors. I think I really understood what worked and what didn't for me, and it was really helpful to be able to build different projects that were actually compounding specific skills that I wanted as a robotics engineer. And definitely Trovador was born out of TKS, I would say. um, I did my focus in robotics, and my create project, the last project we do, was Trovador. And it was a mix of algorithms I had worked on, and I was like, okay, where can I use this for? And a lot of the Portuguese situation related to wildfires and delayed reforestation. Um, but it definitely compounds a lot of the knowledge you already gained. So basically, even if you go to TKS and you already love like a very specific technology, you're at least able to understand how you can advance yourself even more. Um, and for me, for example, I knew like if you work in robotics, you need to be a very like flexible person, because robotics is not just one thing. It's 3D printing, it's mechanics, electronics, it's AI, just random software, even like back-end engineering. You need to do a little bit of everything. And something great about TKS was that I was trying, and I focused my work on the thing I knew I hated the most, which is software. I do not like software, and I know I work in robotics, but I knew that was like my biggest like challenge mentally. And I knew that if I was able to spend a year working on really advanced algorithms for robotics, I would be pushing myself a lot into like the bias towards action and being so afraid of not being able to debug a code or actually building the software I wanted. Um, and so for me, TKS did those two things. First, helped me how to be more efficient in learning, but also I used it as a push towards doing the things I didn't want to learn, but I knew I needed them. And today they're really, really helpful. So that's I think how I took the most advantage of the program
Yeah.
itself.
Interesting. So, I mean, given your experience sort of pushing through learning software, like what advice do you have for people who are trying to learn things that they just don't want to be learning?
That's funny. I would say just do it. Like literally, at the time I used to I use an expression which is sitting down with myself, and it's literally almost like looking at myself in the mirror and saying, if you really do not want to do this, specifically in a topic that you don't want to learn, but deep down I think you're only having that conversation because you actually want to, but you're just like extremely afraid of being really really bad at it or not being able to just solve it, and problem solve it. So just literally just do it, because the more steps you just take forward, the more you'll understand that you're actually really capable of doing it, and it's not that complicated. Like software, I know it's software is not that complicated. For some reason I just have that pre-concept in my head that it's not something for me, and I still believe that, but at least I know I'm capable of doing it, even though it's not it's not my favorite thing to do. So definitely just do it. It's like Nike slogan, the best one for this.
Yeah, yeah, and in the end, I mean, is your review positive? Was it worth it to push through on that? Do you think like the investment of time made sense?
Totally, totally. I think the more things you learn, specifically if it's something you want to do in your future, the more capable you'll be. Like for example, like I have my startup right now, right? And I'm not the only one working on it, thankfully. So for me to be able to organize, even in just a macro level, the people who are working on the software, I need to know how those stuff work. And you need to be skilled in a lot of things. Obviously, you might want to specialize in something, but the more general you are, the more capable you are of being useful to many, many other projects and being prone to even try new things. So I think it's always useful to learn things that you might not always enjoy. This is not super straightforward, but this that would be my opinion regarding that.
Yeah, I think that makes total sense. And I mean, okay, we have to talk about it. Tell me, like, what was the first 2 weeks of starting Troubadour? Were you? I know this was part of the challenge that was sort of like the end of year thing for TKS. Um, so obviously you were setting out to find something. Oftentimes, a lot of people set out to find things. A lot of times they don't successfully find something. What was that process like? And then we can sort of just continue into what Troubadour looks like today.
So I think it all came down to the problem itself. To me, like, forests are a really important part of my childhood, as I mentioned, and I spent like a month or so trying to understand why reforestation in this country is just so slow. And I talked to a lot of people. I was rejected from a lot of people at the same time. So just reducing this answer to 2 weeks is going to be literally impossible. But it was a lot of just getting to the root cause of why is this happening. And I understood that it's basically terrain is horrible. We just have mountains everywhere, cliffs everywhere. No one is actually carrying like 100 kilograms of trees to anywhere to plant them. Like it's just super dangerous, so it doesn't happen. And so I went to look into other technologies, and I understood that there's so many flaws in all of them that definitely that would be a robot that I could invent that could basically solve them, and or at least not have them and be more efficient in that sense. So the biggest challenge building Troubadour was really being able to crawl in slopes or walk or climb in slopes. So you need something that is extremely stable. And the first 3 months we're literally working on that algorithm, which is called the PID algorithm, and is basically trying to have the center of mass the robot 100% stable all the time. And that was that was not a funny story. Nothing was working. Even the sensor I was using was not working. Um, and in the algorithm itself, it's not super straightforward when you don't pay a lot of attention to math at high school. So it was definitely really frustrating. But again, as I mentioned before, I think because I had such a purpose to do it, I just kept pushing myself. And it was definitely not easy, but it was 100% worth it. Especially because even after that, when I built the prototype and I tested it and it just totally broke apart, um, I knew I had something that was really really worth sharing and worth just trying more and building something that was even more capable. Um, that if I didn't have a purpose, this would definitely not have happened. Especially because of that algorithm that we're not friends anymore, and now we're working on a different one. But yeah, it was a complicated a few months. So
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine. I do not envy that. Um, and so, okay, so you obviously you struggled with this algorithm for months, but that was following. I imagine the end of that like TCAS challenge specifically was the what was where you ideated and you pitched for that. Did that and what that looked like look the same after those 3 months after you had the first iteration out uh, today even or as you went did things evolve?
yeah, the reality is I've been pitching the same prototype in a year and a half almost. So what happened was, and this is something I do since I am like really really young, which is building prototypes with just recycled electronics, even if they're not working. just so I have more problems later on. But um, really, I built it with 15 euros, which is approximately like $15, and a lot of recycled materials. So if you look at pictures of the first prototype, and I don't even call it prototype anymore, it's just a proof of concept because it was so um, bad in a way, like moving, that I just not call it prototype anymore. But you can even see like an egg box on top. Most of the legs are just like PVC cutted by hand. There's no 3D printer here. Um, and so that's literally the first prototype. But I knew like I had such a big vision and I was so focused that this is going to work somehow because the problem was real. And even though like the months after I defined it even better and learned about much more about it, I knew there's something worth about it, and I pitched that weird prototype, and I still do to this day because right now we're working on a new chassis, so it's going to be like 4 times bigger in volume. And carry much more saplings. We're expecting to carry like 250 saplings on top. Um, and it's basically the same anatomy, has a few differences obviously because a lot of things that didn't work out also taught me a lot of how the field work is going to going to work out. But it's pretty much the same, except obviously the size. And because we don't have the chassis yet, every single pitch that I do is still a little proof of concept with a neck box on top. A little bit silly, but honestly, it's how everything started. And I still have like that same vision, and even though we are not yet testing the new chassis and all that, we're still designing it. I still know this is like a really great idea to overcome an issue I'm extremely passionate about. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
basically the story of this prototype, I would say.
That is super, super cool. I mean, first of all, just like incredible level of scrappiness. Maybe we should start. We should have the grants that we give at Merge start at $15. Because if you can make all this progress based off of a $15 prototype or proof of concept, then I think that's excellent. But this also I feel like goes back to what you were talking about with the teacher at the robotics club, sort of being excited about like how passionate, excited you guys were about this, but also like in a way the naivete of let me just like try this out and see what happens. And in a way, I feel like we can see examples of that with so many great founders, where even they're sitting there with like the uh, proof of concept that it does not look very robust maybe, but they have that vision, and they're gonna do whatever it takes to get to the other end of this journey to success. But okay, so that's how things got started. Maybe explain to people like what specifically this thing does. It sounds like it carries these saplings. It can like traverse cliffs and rough terrain and stuff like that. How does it actually go about planting trees? And I feel like if you gave me a bunch of saplings and I went into a forest, I don't even know really what I'm doing. Do I have to like space it out in between trees to make sure that there's enough space? Do I how deep do I have to dig? There's all these levels of complexity that I think people might not necessarily think of when a very like seemingly, I think, deceivingly simple idea of like just a robot that plants trees sounds like. But what how does this thing work, and what does it do?
Yeah, so one thing I understood was that planting trees is it's an extremely delicate process. A lot of variables need to be checked for the tree to survive, and most times it's luck, because we cannot control a lot of things like the weather. And so there's usually two perspectives or two, I would say, actions in the reforestation world. There's people who think about scaling reforestation massively, and a lot of times that world is really related to making money out of reforestation. And there's also another world that is extremely focused in the sustainability and being able to reforest in a community level. So in the community level, you have people just planting by hand, which is extremely slow. It's extremely dangerous most times. Obviously, depends the region, but it's extremely dangerous in a lot of places. And in the other side, you have tractors. So tractors that just plant really, really fast and go almost anywhere. But tractors have a lot of problems, especially because they're heavy. And the fact that they're heavy basically impacts the survival rate of the trees that they're planting. Actually, when you compact the soil, that can last up to 14 years and reduce their germination rate by 80%. So it's like a massive impact. So people thought, okay, let's scale this up and not really focusing on the survival rate, but really how to even accelerate the reforestation process even more. And people transitioned to drones and planting seeds from the sky. And that brought another problem, which is the survival rates again. And there's a lot of estimates that say that basically drones have like seed survival rates of 10 to 20%. So they're just wasting a lot of natural resources in this world. Like seeds are extremely, extremely scarce. So when building Trovador, I focused on these two things. Not being dangerous, like a dangerous machine. So basically being autonomous and being able to go to the dangerous terrains, but at the same time, either not damaging the soil, but also maximizing the survival rates. And so what happens in Troubadour is you have a spider-like robot. It has 6 legs, three on each side, and each leg performs a function. Basically, the front leg has a drill. Each front leg has a drill, so two drills on the front. You have two creepers. What they do is they turn 360 and grab saplings from the back, and the back legs have little foot. This foot basically stomp the root collar just to release the air that is underground. And the process of building all these tools was thinking, okay, what needs to happen? And there's a lot of things like the depth where you how you plant the sapling needs to be perfect. The pressure on the roots needs to be perfect. Um, we also want to implement like a thermal camera to measure humidity. So the humidity there is also perfect. Um, because this is really, really delicate. And one thing fails, the tree can either take so much longer to grow or literally not survive. And so how we're planning on doing this is we are developing a UI, so an app where you have like access to the mapping area that you want to reforest. You define the area that you want to deploy the robot and plant. What you do is you connect to the robot, it calculates a trajectory on the app and sends those coordinates to the robot. It goes autonomously to the field, it plants, and you can monitor it from a distance. And what we were able to do with this is a lot of things related to having access to steep terrains. So first, its chassis, because it has so many legs, it's able to adjust to almost any slope and be extremely stable, even if it's carrying like a huge amount of saplings on its back. So that was the first thing we were able to achieve. The other one is the survival rates, as we mentioned. So I went through a lot of research papers and tried to pick up all the things that could influence this. Specifically during the plantation process, there's a lot of things you can do before and after, like post monitoring, pre soil preparation, but specifically what the robot could do, and that was measuring the pH, measuring the humidity, having the perfect depth, pressure, all those things, and also not compacting the soil. So what we are expecting is to have survival rates around 85%. Obviously, this is a little bit of rule of thumb because we haven't been able to test it, but it's based on literature review and a lot of conversations with different biologists that really agree we cannot not either do it from the air or with tractors because those ways don't work at all. And the final thing was not damaging the soil, as I mentioned. So because it has so many legs, it distributes its weight on its little feet. And it's also not compacting it because its feet don't have a huge area where it's touching the ground. So we were able to focus on these three things just by choosing the right anatomy for the robot that we wanted. Um, and that's a little bit how it works. Obviously, there's a huge technical side to, or behind every single step of these. Um, yeah, that's it.
Wow. Wow. That's incredible. And I mean, I know that you guys have been supported by with grants from Innova and National Geographic. What does like the next steps look like? Because to a certain extent, this is a startup. You guys need funding to continue iterating on this. You know, hardware is not uh, cheap all necessarily. So, I mean, what is what do the next like 6 months look like with this? Are you guys at a place where you feel like you have the funds necessary to continue building and iterating and shipping? Are you looking for more grant capital? Are you wanting to take a venture scale path? I'm curious to hear what the next steps are for this.
Yeah, so the next or 6 months are focused on the pilot that we want to launch. And for that, we're kind of programming it in like walking backwards. What we really need right now is working on the software side. So what happens is we have currently three people working on hardware, plus me, and only one person working in software. And obviously, we need someone who is expert in ROS, which is robotics operating systems. And it just really has been quite complicated to find people who are obviously working pro bono, which is something we don't even want to do. So because of that, we really need to raise capital, and even for the hardware side, just to build the robot, that's also a really big priority that would help us ignite a lot of the parts and purchase all of the materials we need. Because in 6 months from now, what we're planning is around May, we will launch our first large scale pilot in Fundão with a partnership of the municipality in the north. And our plan is really to just test the capabilities of the robot. So what we want to do is build the first case study on this type of locomotion outdoors related to reforestation, and be basically able to say it can climb slopes of these amount of degrees, plant at this velocity, have this much endurance, and test all these KPIs, and then be able to raise even more capital to build a team and just do more pilots, so that we have a solid foundation to actually do reforestation services. And this pilot is, I would say, the milestone that I've been looking forward for the past 2 years, is really putting it out there and seeing what does not work, what works, and how much can we actually do, or do even more with this machine.
Super interesting. So in the end, I mean, I don't know if they are literally a customer or if they are like more so a user, but it sounds like, local or state, or maybe I guess it could be in some cases federal governments are the end user of this, at least in terms of who you would be communicating with directly to sort of say like, we have these robots that can perform X functionality. And now, if you want them, like this is the deal. Are they the ones that will end up purchasing robots from you guys? I imagine with the first test, this is something that you maybe aren't charging for, but I don't know. I'd be really curious to hear how you like approach the municipality in the first place. Obviously, you've made a ton of really great progress, but at the same time, it's not like you're a 40-year-old PhD with a crazy team and 10 million Series A round. So how did you approach that with the limited credibility and as early as you are in the progress with the project?
Yeah, so just to answer the first thing you mentioned, municipalities and governments are not so much a customer that would buy us the robot. So what we want to do is sell services, which even though right now they're harder to scale, we want to focus on being able to just monitor the machines all the time, specifically because they're not going to be super user friendly at first. So being able to do the service ourselves. Obviously, in the future, there's going to be a lot of customers, specifically private companies that want to do reforestation for many purposes, that will most definitely want to purchase the robots. For now, we're mainly focusing on doing the services ourselves, and our whole business model is just around doing that. So basically, charging per tree, which is basically more affordable for large scale and small scale. Um, and to answer your question regarding the municipality and all the credibility side, um, building Trovador was really, really hard at the time. So I was finishing high school, I was in 12th grade, and I had national exams. So in Portugal, what we do is in the final year of high school, we have these massive exams that we need to do in order to go to university. And for me, it was actually even more complicated because I had annulled a few subjects. So basically, I thought that the grades I was having at school did not reflect my capabilities. So I basically canceled them, and then I had to do the exams, and that would basically reflect my entire grade for the 3 years of high school. So there was a lot of pressure, but I was not attending classes. I was focusing 100% on TKS and this project. And um, there were so many side eyes from teachers on why are you not focusing on this, or on, I'm sorry, on classes and the exams and everything. This is so important. And even family pressure in terms of please do not screw this up, and focus on something that will bring you more support in the future. But I knew somehow this project meant way too much just to give more time to other things. And so the credibility was really not helping that, because I was reaching out to experts on LinkedIn. I wanted to do an algorithm that I had no idea how to. So I really needed help, and not having a bachelor's even um, was not helping in that sense. And then when you propose yourself to build or launch a startup, you have no capital, you have no resources, because I didn't even have like a regular 3D printer here, or access to any 3D printer anywhere. um, it just seems really, really impossible. So what I set myself to do was, okay, I'm going to do this anyway, and I needed to figure it out. I don't know how, but yeah. And I knew I needed capital, so I spent a year trying to raise a good amount of money. And I applied to a few challenges, I applied to a few grants, and eventually I learned a lot of things and a lot of tools, and I got to win the National Geographic grant, and that gave me a lot of credibility. And I think it really reflected my focus towards the ultimate impact, and not just having a huge carbon credit business model, or just making money or scaling reforestation. Like, I don't know, I was really focused on my community, and that was able to communicate to people that I really wanted to do this, and I was really for real with it. And from that point, I think things started to get better in that sense. Specifically with the municipality, we want to work in May. I won an entrepreneurship competition. It's not really how we call it here, but I'm going to call it this way in English. And one of the companies that sponsored the award we won, which is called Capgemini, they are doing a partnership with us to help us develop the software part. So basically, tutoring us on how to navigate all the techniques we have for path management and all the techniques for obstacle detection. Um, And one of the partnerships they have is with that municipality, and they suggested doing it there. And it was actually a really great suggestion because Fundão, which is the name of the municipality, suffered from wildfires this last year. And it was like really, really a really bad situation. Once again, Portugal deals with this almost every year or every summer in a different place, and it was Fundão, and it was actually really perfect because we could try it in a way in an area that really needed our support, even though we're not yet able to deliver it at a scale that is relevant or significant for them. But that's really how we got that connection, and they're really, or at least they seem to be really receptive to this type of technology, because being able to protect or restore Portugal in a way that, or in the way that we want, seems to bring a lot of hope to people, because everyone is literally experiencing the delay of reforesting in this country. So I would say municipalities are our biggest focus, because that's where we can bring the most joy to communities, and the most, yeah, it's really the backbone of a lot of villages here. So it's going to be really important if we're able to do this even more in the future.
Super cool. Super cool. So, I mean, in the end, the support from National Geographic and these other two like prizes slash grants slash challenges that you ended up winning and being awarded, sort of, it seems like that gave you the credibility, but also led to the perfect kind of partnership that otherwise, at least if I were, if I were trying to do this, would have been daunting with just a starting fresh, on a fresh slate of credibility. So that's super interesting, and seems like it's absolutely timely. Obviously, I mean, I'm learning about this for the first time, that this, wildfires are a big issue in Portugal, but even here in the States, we have wildfires, horrible wildfires in LA. So it seems like this is something that absolutely needs to be done. So definitely, wishing you the best of luck over the next 3 to 6 months with this next pilot. But before we wrap up and I let you go, I'd love to hear, for people listening who might just be getting started, maybe in robotics, maybe in software, maybe in something completely different. Do you have any words of advice for people just getting started?
I would say do things that matter to you, and make sense for you. And making sense is actually really important. I used to think I was going to be an engineer, like really, really strongly. I knew it from my gut. I was going to build robots for the rest of my life, and I'm going to study engineering. And from all the projects that I built, because I put myself to, I learned that there's actually another passion in my life, which is making impact. And the biggest skill I understood I needed was not engineering. I'm building robots since I remember. So why am I going to university? Does that really make sense for me? And that question just has been with me for the past 2 years. And this really long gap year that that I'm taking got me to answer that what really makes sense for me is to learn the thing that is going to make me able of having the impact I want to. Um, and just analyzing all the projects I built in climate and robotics, the biggest difficulty is always making nature based projects economically sustainable. No one wants to invest in climate, or very few people want to. Very few people understand the impact and the necessity of nature based services. So, being able to build something that is creating impact and is also sustainable in the long run is, or became to me, the key that I wanted or that I needed to do what I love. And so I came to understand that I actually want to learn how to do business in this, like impact business and sustainability or ecopreneurship. There's so many ways for many words for this. And so now I'm really leaning towards learning about ecopreneurship and systems thinking and donut economics and SDG financing, all these type of things that are actually going to take my robot from the workshop out to the world and create the impact that I want. And this would not be possible if I didn't put myself out there. So to just wrap this up in a few words is do things that make sense for you and your passions, and never be afraid of trying new stuff. It's just going to build up you as a better person and a more well-rounded in that sense. So yeah,
Yeah.
that would be it.
Yeah. No, I love it. I love it. Everything is downstream of the mission. Once you find something that is just perfect for you. No, I think that's a great place to wrap. Thank you so much, Marta, for hopping on the podcast. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ari. I really, really enjoyed it, and thank you for having me. This was really nice. Thank you.